One of the biggest complaints that chess players make, especially beginners, is the struggle to find a really good response as black against one d4 from white. In my opinion, the easiest response we can give against d4 is playing d5 symmetrically in a Queen's Gambit decline fashion. Even Hikaru himself in one of his videos says that this is probably the best option for black against 1d4, and there is no way to learn, no reason why to learn any other openings against d4. And even if your opponent goes for a different opening like the London system, for example, you can still play in the same fashion using similar moves as the one that I'm going to show you in this video. So let's take a look here. Your opponent is going to start the game by playing d4, and your response is going to be d5, playing symmetrically on the board. If your opponent goes for c4, Queen's Gambit, you're not going to take the pawn and accept the gambit. We're actually going to reinforce our central pawn by playing e6. Opponent is going to keep pressuring this pawn right here by playing knight to c3, adding one more attacker. We're going to play knight to f6, defending our central pawn one more time. In this case, white's going to go for a developing move, knight f3. We're going to develop our bishop to e7, preparing to castle next move. Opponent's going to play probably bishop to g5, developing the bishop first, and then closing the pawn chain with the bishop outside of the pawn chain. We're going to castle after that. This is our plan. So you can see this is a very basic setup, right, guys? You play moves like d5, and then you play a6 here, you develop the knight, bishop, castle, very simple plan. And now we can try to kick this bishop away, asking this bishop the question, what do you want to do with your life, right? So after a move like e3, closing now the pawn chain, we're going to play h6, and more often than not, white's going to retreat the bishop to h4. In this situation, we're going to play b6, preparing to fianchetto this bishop, because it's just easier to develop this bishop to the long diagonal here. This move, for example, is not really interesting for the bishop, so we want to place this bishop right here. But in this position, white can go for two moves. They can try to release the tension by taking the central pawn here, or they might go for a developing move, preparing to castle next move, and keeping the tension for a little while. Let's see what happens if white takes this pawn. If white takes, we're going to recapture it with the knight. Always remember, we recapture this central pawn with the knight, okay? And in this situation, these two bishops are staring at each other, and more often than not, probably white's going to take the bishop, and we recapture with the queen. We could recapture with the knight here, but this knight is very well placed here in the center. It's a very strong piece, so we want to keep it as it is, where it is, and we're going to recapture with the queen because of that. Of course, white's going to try to trade this very powerful knight that we have on the center of the board. By taking it, we recapture with the pawn. And after that, we can see that probably white's going to follow with the plan like developing and trying to castle here on the king side. So they play bishop to d3. We're going to strike in the center, playing c5. And after white castles, we're going to play c4. We're not going to take the pawn here. We're going to push even further, trying to attack this bishop right here. And after the bishop retreats, we're going to play knight to c6. We're trying to push these pawns and try to get a passed pawn on the queen side of the board. Now we're going to play on this side of the board. After a move like b3, challenging our central pawn right here, we're going to ignore that and defend our pawn. We're supporting this pawn and this advancement. Let's say a move like a4, trying to undermine our pawns. We're going to ignore that to play b4. We're pushing our pawns. After white takes, we take with the d pawn. And look at this. We have two passers already. We're going to play with these two passed pawns on the queen side, trying to queen them. It's very hard for white to stop this. So taking the pawn is not a really good option for white. Another option they have here, like we said, instead of taking, is just developing the bishop here and trying to go for a castle. So they are going to play bishop to d3. And after that, we're going to develop our bishop here, fianchetto. That was our plan at the start of this move, right? We played b6 to fianchetto the bishop. That was the idea. And after, let's say, white castles here, we're going to play knight b to d7, preparing this push right here in the center of the board. Rook to c1 from white, we're going to play c5 now. We prepared this move, right? We played knight here to push the pawn, so we're going to do that. And here, from here, white can go for 3 different options. They can take this pawn, they can take the central pawn, or they can ignore that and play a move like queen here, keeping the tension here for a little longer. So let's take what happens. Let's see what happens if white takes our central pawn. Remember, we're going to recapture with the knight here. And when we recapture with the knight, the bishops are staring at each other. Probably white's going to trade bishops. We take with the queen, remember? And after white trades the knight, our very powerful knight, this time we're not going to take with the pawn, because if we take with the pawn, this pawn is going to be here blocking our fianchettoed bishop. That's not going to be really nice for it. So we recapture with the bishop, keeping this open diagonal, this open diagonal for our bishop. And after, let's say, a move like e4 attacking our bishop, we just drop it back, and we have a great game here for black. We developed all our pieces, the opening stage is finished, and we got out of the opening stage without dropping any pieces. This is a great position for black. It's very hard for white to attack us. We are very solid here. This is a great position for black. If instead of taking the central pawn, white takes this pawn, that's why we put this knight right here, right? In order to protect this advancement. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to recapture with the knight. Knight takes c5. And after now white taking the central pawn, this time we're going to we're not going to take it with the knight right away. We're going to wait a little longer. First, we're going to take this bishop, and then we're going to recapture this pawn. So first, knight takes bishop on d3. And then after queen recaptures, now we take with the knight. Again, bishops are staring at each other. We trade, and we have a great position here. If knight takes to trade this very strong knight, we recapture with the bishop again, keeping the open diagonal for our bishop. And this is a great position for black. Again, we can centralize the rooks if we want here to the open files. It's just a great position, very solid. It's very hard for white to attack us. Of course, white might go for a different route, keeping the tension on the center, in the center, and moving, let's say, the queen here, queen to e2. And in this position, now we're going to do something different. We're going to put this knight in this very strong spot here, and we're going to play knight to e4. And now we're threatening to take that knight and doubling, maybe here they can take with the rook still, but the idea is to trade this knight. We have this very powerful knight here in the center of the board. Bishops are staring at each other again, so probably what we're going to see is the bishops being traded again. Or we're going to take with the queen one more time. And after rook, after d1, we're going to take that knight on c3. White's going to recapture with the rook. And then we take the central pawn. Now we're going to break this tension by taking the central pawn. That's the right time to do that. And after c takes d4, knight takes d4, we're going to play rook a to c8, putting the rook in the semi-open file, exerting some pressure. On this pawn, we have some pieces attacking it. We can build the pressure in this pawn yet again by playing other moves. And this is a great move, great position for black. Very hard for white to attack us. This is just extremely solid. And again, if your opponent goes for something different, let's say we play d5 and they go for like a London system approach, not a big deal. We can keep following our plans by playing moves like e6, developing the knight here. This bishop can even go here to challenge the London bishop. We can keep castling. We can still play similar moves, fianchetto the bishop. We can do all of that. We can follow a similar plan because this setup with the QGD, the Queen's Gambit declined, it's extremely easy to play and it's very solid for black. This is one of the easiest and best responses that we can have against 1d4. So guys, if you liked this video, if you learned how to play the Queen's Gambit decline as black, very simple structure, very simple setup that you can follow, please leave a like, comment in the video, and share with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and as always, I see you guys in the next one.